And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work.
I want to try and put a video together, and I'm going to try and make it as quick as I possibly can, but I think it might end up being a long one. And I do apologise for that, but I'm interested to. I'm keen to put something together which would help people that maybe are not aware of how we've ended up at this point, really. You know, we were brought up in a society where we are led to believe in our freedom, you know, that we have freedom, we live in a free country, you know, and that we look at, say, third world countries or North Korea, etc., as, you know, wouldn't it be awful living in a place like that? You know, and that's where we're you know, where we're brought up. So we're led to believe that we live in this free country and we've got complete freedom of choice and freedom of expression and everything else. And for the most part of my you know, upbringing, my childhood and my adult life, I had no reason to question that, to be honest with you. You know, I had no reason to question that until my own kind of awakening, and then 2020 came, and it was like, you know, I mean, I was already down enough rabbit holes, if you like, to recognise what was being brought forward in 2020. But now in 2025, we have now reached a point where they are, in the UK, they are ready to unleash part 2, if you like, which is going to be, in my opinion, tougher than what we dealt with in 2020. Now, this video, I hope, will resonate with people that maybe didn't even see what a lot of freedom fighter type people, truther type people, conspiracy theorists, if you like, that's what we're branded as, saw in 2020. Because now digital ID has been announced by Keir Starmer, it's important, I think, to kind of figure out what it is, and explain, you know, what its intention is, because what they are selling us, it isn't going to be what it's really for. The purpose for digital ID is, unfortunately, quite disturbing and dystopian, you know. So not to scare anyone, but the reality is important, you know, because it's not just our lives right now that's at stake. It's not just our situation that we have in our lives right now that's at stake. It's our children's lives. This is where my passion really starts to come in play, as it did in 2020 for me, was you're coming for my kids. And the world has changed. As unfortunately, the world is not the same as it was prior to 2020. They told us this as well, that the world is never going to go back to the way it was. If we accept digital ID for what they're intending, if we don't push back, if we don't fight this off and rise as a collective to stop this, life is never going to be the same again. And our kids are going to get it the worst. And the generations after that are going to be born into a digital slavery system that is going to be very difficult to break away. We're born into a slavery system ourselves, and I'll go into that. And we're normalised into that, and that we've kind of just lived our lives not knowing it. Well, most of us not knowing it. I can't even imagine how horrendous it will be for future generations to live in what is a digital prison, literally a digital prison. If you've not looked into the digital rollout in China, for example, or it's just been pretty much rolled out in India, it's quite terrifying. If you've not looked into social crediting scores, if you've not looked into the fact that they are now considering, you know, Keir Starmer kind of slipped it. He was in India, I think, last week, and he kind of slipped it in that in India they get access to the money via their digital ID. Now, we were told with Keir Starmer's opening announcement of the Brit card that this would be to help with migration, which is an engineered situation anyway, by the way. But this was not about, it's nothing to do with migration. This is about control. There's no two ways about it.
Here in India, I think it's 1 billion people have digital ID. It's been taken up on a voluntary basis in huge numbers, not least because it means that you can access your own money, make payments.
Once they have a digital infrastructure, which they do have actually, and I'll get into that in a minute, once this is connected to our money, this is going to be tough. People's lives are going to change. AI's rapidly being brought into our world, our consciousness. It's already affecting jobs. This is going to continue. You're not going to really need much police on the beat, to be honest, in years to come. It won't be needed because we'll police ourselves. Because a social crediting system, you will behave yourself.
Everywhere she goes, Ouyang Haoyu is followed. What she buys, how she behaves, is tracked and scored to show how responsible and trustworthy she is. It's called the social credit system, and in one version now being tested, a person's reputation is scored on a scale of 350 to 950. And Haoyu, with a good score of 752, is okay with it. In fact, most people are.
It's a mechanism like pushes you to become a better citizen.
It's big data meets Big Brother, expanding how the government monitors, understands, and ultimately controls its 1.4 billion citizens. Thanks to advances in artificial intelligence and facial recognition, and a web of more than 200 million surveillance cameras.
Are people bothered by privacy concerns?
We think the lot of camera keep the safety is really good. We can accept it.
Companies are experimenting with the algorithms to help the government create the new national social credit system. The government also has pilot projects. In one, citizens are required to do hours of unpaid work to get benefits. And scores are docked for things like littering, a messy yard, gossip, even jaywalking. Video of offenders is shown on the local news. And information collectors like Zhou Aini are paid to report on their neighbors. Her quota, 10 entries a month. Like the man who carried a drunk person home. A good deed, she says. Good social credit gets rewarded with perks like cheap loans and travel deals. But a bad score means public shame and worse. Huang Huijun lost a court case and didn't pay. Now he's on a government blacklist. I can't buy airplane or train tickets, he says, and the list goes on. Being discredited makes it hard to get a job or put kids in top schools. The social credit system will go nationwide next year, and few here are willing to criticize it. Something that may pose a risk itself for a bad score and the life that comes with it.
This is about behaviour. This is what it's all about. How to manage and control people's behaviour through a social crediting score. So ultimately, and look into it, just do your research. This is, you know, you don't believe what I'm saying. Look into it, see where this is going. So once this is attached to money, to central bank digital currencies, because that's where this is going as well, you see in the high street banks closing all over the place. There's a reason for that, because everything is online. And what they'll do, they see there's going to be a crash at some point, and the fiat currency, which is a debt slavement, and again I'll come into that in a bit, is going to be replaced by central bank digital currencies. These central bank digital currencies will not be like the money that we're used to with cash. They're not backed with anything. My fiat currency is not backed with anything, but they're not. What it will be is like a voucher. It's going to be like it's a programmable voucher, basically. And if you are not behaving yourself in a certain way, well, they will be able to switch you off. Your whole life will be digital, and they will be able to stop you traveling. They'll be able to stop you accessing your money. They'll be able to tell you that you've drank too much beer this week, for example, and you can't have any more. If you're on social media, as I am, you know, trying to talk against the state as such, it's not going to go well for people like me. And if you're connected to a person like me, for example, a conspiracy theorist in family or as a friend, the chances are your social crediting will be affected also. You know, in China, you can gain more points by dobbing your neighbour in for their behaviour. So they're going to encourage this kind of behaviour, as they did in 2020. You know, they did do that. You might not like the fact that I'm saying that, but that was true. You know, if your neighbour's behaving and not going by the rules, you can let the authorities know, and the police will be round the door. It happened, and won't necessarily need police, because you have an app to book your taxi or to book your rail fare or your flight or whatever. And if you've not behaved yourself, so sorry, you will not have access to those facilities. That is where it's going. It sounds dystopian, because it is. It's literally going to be a living nightmare. So I want to try and piece things together of how we got to this point, and I want to try and bring some positivity into this as well, of how we actually break free from it as well. So I'm gonna look at sort of politics, because politics isn't what I believed to be as a kid growing up. You know, I was always quite political, but politics is now a corporate cage. You know, I'll look into some false flags. You know, the fact that when the internet came in as well, we were told this internet was a free source, if you like. You know, obviously you had to pay for connection and things like that, but ultimately the free internet concept is a lie. And it's now, they play the long game. So I know, yeah, conspiracy theory stands here, but they play the long game, and we have run our lives completely via our smartphones and via the internet these days, and we're also addicted to them. So they can push our lives, they can manufacture our lives and engineer our lives through the internet, which comes into the programming side of things. We are easily programmed, unfortunately, and I'll get into that. I'll talk about who the architects are, and the spells that we are under. I'll talk about the new religion, which is climate change, because that falls into the whole Agenda 2030, and the reasons, or one of the excuses, not the reasons, the excuses for digital ID and net zero and things like that, and how they're going to control us in that way. You know, how do they control the narrative? Then there's controlled opposition as well. I'll talk a little bit about that, and how things have changed in terms of, especially over the past 20 years, like wokeism and things like that. How, you know, people's perceptions have changed, and how's that happened, and how's that shaping this whole situation itself. and who benefits as well. So I'll talk about who benefits, and then I'll end it with, what we can do about it. Because let's be honest, we don't want to live in a dystopian nightmare. Nobody does.
I think the big battle in this regard in the 21st century will be between privacy and health will win. Most people will be willing to give up their privacy in exchange for much better healthcare based on 24 hours monitoring of what's happening inside their bodies. I guess very soon people will walk around with biometric sensors on or even inside their bodies, and will allow Google or Facebook or the Chinese government or whoever to constantly monitor what's happening inside my body, so that the day the first cancer cell starts to multiply and spread, somebody at Google or at the health authority will know and will be able very easily to nip the cancer in the bud. And the day that a flu epidemic starts, they immediately know, a flu epidemic is starting, and they know who are the people who are carrying it, and they can take very effective and quick and cheap action to prevent it. So the promises are enormous. Just think of, a place like North Korea. People walking around with these biometric bracelets, and you walk into a room and you see a picture of Kim Jong-un on the wall, and something happens to your blood pressure that the algorithm correlates with some bad emotion like anger, and that's the end of you.
Okay, so you've watched this little clip on our lovely friend Harari, who's a very good friend of the World Economic Forum, and he's pretty much spelled out what this is all about. Unfortunately, they do tell us. So we've got no excuses, really. The fact that we know what they're doing, it's down to us as a collective and as individuals to stand strong in this, and not accept this, because once we accept it, there's literally, it's going to be very difficult to go back on it, if at all would go back on it. And like I said before, our future generations are going to be stuck in this nightmare. The fact is, no matter what the likes of Harari says, we were born free, and we didn't owe anyone anything at all, but we're born into a system that has other plans. Hence why I talk about the fact that we were born, out the systems we're in are an enslavement system, but we didn't recognize it. But future generations in a dystopian digital nightmare, well, it could be a hell of a lot worse than what we've got. But so I'm going to try, and I'm not an expert in this at all, and I'd certainly recommend reaching out to people like Callie Spell at Dark Matters Network or David Edelman. There's numerous lawyers out there that know how this works better than I do. But from the second our name is written down from birth, they create a file on us. They give us a number. They track our movements, our earnings, our choices, and obviously they tell us that's freedom, but clearly it's not. But we believe it is, and and it's a contract really that we never signed, or our parents never signed, and we just didn't know. But the fact is, we're not actually living in sovereign countries anymore, and I don't know when that changed. That might have been for millennium, but we're living really inside corporate franchises now. And I don't think most people have clocked it yet, but life is running faster, and most people are earning less, if not the same as what they did years ago, but they're working harder, they're doing more hours. Everyone's on this hamster wheel and this treadmill, and people are wondering why nothing at all feels like it belongs to them, and everyone's exhausted. And we all know deep down that this life, the way that isn't right. So it's not about left or right, by the way, you know, Labour or Tory, you know, it's not about politics anymore. It's about ownership, really. You know, who owns us? You know, our labour, our efforts, our data, our body, even our children, because that's where it's going. And I know that, you know, some people will be watching this going, whatever, and you know, but you don't want to hear it. But this is the way it is. You know, what's happening now is quite frightening, and I want you to just bear with me while I try and get through this. So this is how the illusion works. The whole thing looks like government, which means mind control anyway, but nevertheless, this looks like government. You've seen this theatre in Westminster, and you know, Prime Minister's Question Times and all that, and it acts like a business, really, rather than this. They're supposed to be public servants. This is what we forget, and they forget. We supposedly, in a democratic situation, vote people in to act on our behalf and for our best interests. But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But they do need to be. We do need to remind them that they are actually public servants. But it all acts like a business. Our birth certificate is a kind of stock certificate, really, and our national insurance number is effectively a tracking code. And every time that we sign our name without thinking, it's treated like consent. The system is built to confuse us. Totally confuses me. I'm not that smart, far from it. That's why I would recommend speaking to much more intelligent people about these kind of things, this law kind of thing. People like I said, Callie Spell at Dark Matters. She's much more capable of explaining this than I am. But the system, like I say, is built to confuse us, and it's built to keep us working just hard enough to stay afloat, mainly us peasants, you know, but not enough to break free, unless you're lucky. And there's a few that's been lucky, but you know, most of us are just flogging away at the bottom end. We pay tax. Most of us will follow the rules and obey the mandates, etc. But you still tend to feel like a number, because that's exactly what the system treats us as. It's not a conspiracy, you know, literally this is all paperwork, and really it's time, and like I say, I'm not that clever, but it's time we all looked at how this system is working, because it's not doing us much good, really. Debt is used as a weapon, and it's a great way to control a nation, you know. So the best way to control a person, really, is to trap them in debt, because it brings fear, doesn't it? And when you live in a world where everything costs and nothing truly belongs to you, your land, the water, your time, you begin to forget what freedom feels like, and you work harder just to lose more. And if you step out of line, they can cut you off. And that's where digital money and digital ID and social crediting will come in, because they literally will be able to just switch you off. And unfortunately, it's not just coming, it's actually here. They're talking about the brick card. I'll just get into this. They're talking about the brick card, and I'll just try and bring a warning to this, because we're going to go out and campaign that we don't want digital ID. We don't. I think they're going to tell us that the brick card is digital ID, but I think that's a ruse. I think that's a decoy, you know, because politically, what could happen here is a new government could come in, for example, a general election could come in and say, we don't want this, you know, because the people don't want it. And they could already say, right, well, we're not having the brick card. Or there could be a change of leadership and the new leader coming and say, no, the people don't want it, so we're going to shelve that for now, you know, and carry on as we're doing. But they've got a one login, a Gov1 login already in place that's already connected to your driver's license. It's going to be connected to your tax returns. You know, they're obviously pushing small businesses and, well, any business now that they have to go through this facility. So the digital ID infrastructure is already in place, and the plan will be eventually to bring it all together under this one login. So what I'm saying is, where the brick card situation is, if they knock that on their head because we're standing up together and we don't want it, let's not celebrate too early. That's all I'm going to say, because the infrastructure is already in place and they use stealth. They use stealth and little tactics where they're already bringing us in to this one government, one login government app. It's already in place. So we've got to be aware of this. We've got to be aware of this. With this situation, like I mentioned, the CBDC, it'll become a digital chain. It'll become a digital chain, and it's a real worry. They'll flag it all as convenience and for our safety and efficiency and protection and things like that.
We will learn from the experiences of other countries, some of whom have had digital ID for over 20 years. Many show us just how transformative this can be. In Denmark, a graduate applying for jobs only has to log into a portal once, and their ID automatically links to their school records, saving them retyping their qualifications each time. In Finland, a parent can go online to register their children for daycare without uploading a payslip or putting in their salary, and the site automatically calculates the right fee. And in Estonia, a digital ID means that when you have a baby, you don't have to go to a local office to register the birth or sign up for childcare benefits or apply for nursery places. It happens automatically from day one in the hospital, so parents are free.
But it's just control. It's control. It's plain and simple. It's just control. And you're going to need it to travel, to work, to get your benefits, to pay your rent. And unfortunately, with programmable money, like I mentioned, they'll decide what you can and can't spend your credits on. For example, as I mentioned about beer, it could be the same with meat. You've had too much meat this week, Mr. Critchley. You know, you've used too much fuel. You've spoken out of line, and they'll just switch us off. And that's what they're doing in China already. They want the Chinese model, and they want it for the world, by the way. This is lockstep. This is not just the UK. This is happening everywhere. This is what they want for the world, because this is not about our UK government doing what they do for the UK people. This is not the way the governments work now. They are working for someone else. They're not working for us. So this is a digital prison, you know, that they want, and we are literally the generation that's got to say no on this. We're the line in the sand here. We've got to draw the line, and we've got to stand in front of this and not allow it. So what do we do? Well, here's where we can start. And I'm no legal expert, as I just mentioned, but I don't think we need to be to make a start. But we just need to remember that we were not born to be owned, so we need to stop giving blind consent. If something doesn't feel right, I think, you know, we've got every right to question it. We've got to be brave, you know, in terms of authorities. Don't matter if they're wearing a suit, you know, it really doesn't matter. We've got to be brave. We're no worse than they are. They're no better than we are, you know, and we've got the right to question things. So do it. And as people will no doubt say, mandates are not laws. You know, we do have a right to say no, and that is something that we must claim. It's our right to say no. We can ask simple questions, you know. Is this a law or is it just a policy? Can you show me the legal statute? You know, what are my options if I don't agree? You know, we use our clear language, you know, because the system runs on words, contracts and scripts and forms and statutes. And, you know, like I said, I'm no expert, but it gets us all muddled up in words. So we can try saying things like, I do not consent. It was a big one in 2020 when they were mandating mask wearing and things like that. I just do not consent, and we've got to get to that strength really, for the sake of our children. Honestly, I just do not consent. This has got to stop. This system was obviously designed to be confusing. So, as I'm saying, you know, ask experts, find experts. There's plenty out there. Go to the Dark Matters Network. Go to David Edelman. There's many others. There's many others, you know. But we can learn together. So we start small, talk to others, and we learn what our natural rights are, and build small communities. You know, it's very worthwhile getting out and meeting people in your local area that are on your wavelength, that can see the fact that this is a problem and we need to find a way around it. It's better in numbers because you feel more confident in numbers. So Stand in the Park was a great thing during the COVID period, where people were able to gather. I had a pub during that time and people gathered, and I'm starting up that gathering again because I think right now people are going to be a bit nervous and anxious about what is happening. And in numbers, we don't have to be alone. And even if you don't get along, like I say, put all your differences to one side right now, because this is far more important, and we've really got to find a way of navigating through this. So to continue on how we got here, and this is for people really, I suppose, who don't really understand, and I'm sorry that I may come across as a conspiracy theorist, but this is literally how it works. Crises are often manufactured, and you get scripted heroes in these situations as well. Every generation has its moment, a crisis, a shock, something big enough to jolt the collective mind. You know, 9/11, the 7/7, the Manchester bombings, COVID, the Capitol riots. There's always some kind of event. But each time these events happen, the same story kind of plays out. You know, the public gets a bit rattled, and then the media drives the fear into the collective, and a solution then is announced that just so happens it tends to remove more of our freedom, and they always will kind of advertise it and market it really well in terms of it's all good for our safety, you know, and they'll butter it up that way, so we accept it. And it's the typical problem, reaction, solution, and it's not. This is not paranoia. unfortunately, once you do see this, you can't unsee it. So they'll create a problem or allow a public crisis. And with that, there'll be a reaction. And that's amplified through the media with fear and experts and emotion. And we're buying to that because we're emotional people generally. And then they'll be offering us a pre-planned solution that will expand control. That could be lockdowns, ID cards, surveillance. This is the things that's been happening in our own generation, and in the past 20 odd years. It's there to be seen. Censorship, they'll bring out these bills, and it's all for our good of our safety. And generally, because of the problem reaction solution, they don't need our vote. They just need our fear, because we'll accept it. It'd be, a terrorism attack as an example. What are you going to do to help us, Mr. Government? The pandemic. What are you going to do, Boris, to help us? Because we're frightened and people are dying. So we're giving them that emotion and that fear for them to provide us with a solution, which they'll already have, because it's already planned out. And the false flag doesn't have to be fake either, and I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying these events are fake by any stretch. Quite often the events are very, very real. It's the response that's scripted. They'll hijack our grief and weaponize our emotion, and this then allows them to steer the public where they want us. Literally pawns on a chessboard. Call me a conspiracy theorist, it's just seemed very convenient timing as they're announcing digital ID regarding the migrant situation in the UK. That would allow for many people emotionally that are frightened. So, well, we need to deal with this terror situation. Who are these people? Digital ID must be the solution, mustn't it? And that's where they want our feelings and our emotion. Just watch the political theatre. Keir Starmer, he's playing the villain right now to a lot of people, to most people, I would have thought. And he's pushing digital ID, and he's acting a bit like a tyrant, which, this is not what people in a democratic society feel we should be having. We're not here to be dictated to, but he's acting like in that manner. And I've had conversations with family members who think the guy's horrendous. Most people I speak to think he's horrendous. Personally, I think he's just there as a puppet. He's an actor. He's doing his job. He's paymasters. These people that get in those positions, they don't have empathy. They're not the same as we are. This is something we unfortunately we've got to get to as well. These people who are in these big positions, they're not like we are. Okay, so what potentially could come out from the fact that Keir Starmer, the tyrant, we don't want him in power, let's get rid of Keir Starmer situation, then that would allow for a potential saviour to come in, couldn't it? And they do this because it's basically theatre. I mean, most of politics now, you may as well watch Coronation Street, to be honest with you, because it's not that much different. However, they're playing with people's lives, so it's obviously a lot worse. But let's have a bit of a play. Say Keir Starmer is removed, and the country celebrate. We've got rid of this lunatic, when they bring in a saviour, and that could be reform, couldn't it? You know, that could be an Andy Burnham, for example, somebody within the Labour camp that's maybe got a bit more sense, or seemingly a bit more sense. But, you know, so they can provide this new hero, but they're just going to be a different actor. And they'll be operating on the same script though, and it'll just feel a little bit different, and it might buy a bit of time on things, but ultimately they're going to be doing the same thing, you know. So they'll literally, as the hero, offer someone who speaks for the people, you know, because we've got, you know, like a situation like in America, for example. You know, Biden had gone so far left. People were like, oh, I'm so sick of this. You know, we need to bring back Donald Trump. You know, and I've always said I'd love to be wrong where Donald Trump's concerned. I just don't buy into it because I just see theatre. You know, but if I'm wrong on that, wonderful. You know, if he's coming to save the world, I don't personally think he is. I don't see it. Digital ID's on our door, and the jabs are still getting rolled out. So I don't really buy it, but if I'm wrong, happy days, you know. Be more than happy to be wrong on that. But this is the thing. So they will offer a hero who's just going to bring in the infrastructures that they plan anyway, but just in a different language. And that's how they'll do it. So Nigel Farage, if you think Nigel Farage is going to come in and be a hero, I think you're going to be wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I think you'll be wrong. He's not a hero. They just basically loop into the same control agenda, you know, and that's what they do. So it doesn't really matter who you vote for, red team, blue team, white hats, black hats. It's just the same game, unfortunately. It's just the same game. I'm sorry to say it, but that's the way I see it anyway. And what about the truth movement itself in terms of controlled opposition? Well, unfortunately, even resistance, you know, is a marketplace really for controlled influences, and it takes discernment, and it's certainly not easy to spot who is directing you in, you know, there's Pied Pipers at play, let's put it that way. You know, people like Russell Brand, who came out not long ago as, you know, I think he had a show on YouTube for a while called Truce or something. Anyway, and then he was doing shows up and down the country exposing government and blah, blah, blah. So we buy into that, but then he'll direct us somewhere else. I mean, Russell Brand is someone actually who had a book out, a child's book, where he's depicted as the Pied Piper as well. They kind of tell us. Anyway, going off tangent a little bit, but this is how it can work within our own group, so we need to be a little bit careful. And they'll have us arguing over different things. For example, QAnon and the Trump thing. You know, we really need to be unifying right now on the cause, which is digital ID. But because there are people who think that you know, the Trump's going to come and save the world, then there'll be others that, you know, on the opposite camp, like myself. But we've got to try and not argue about this, because this is what they want. This is how these things work, because it's divide and conquer, so people fall out and they're not on the same path. So we as a collective need to focus on the end game they have for us. If the white hats and Trump is going to come and save the world, fabulous. But let us as a collective come together, and whatever's going on in the political sphere that may be potentially doing us a favour, let's try and not focus on that. Let's try and focus on what we can do on our level to stop this, and it needs stopping, because, like I say, once it's in place, it's a living nightmare. It's a living nightmare. And while all this is playing out, our children are being indoctrinated, and woke ideology has literally invaded schools, cartoons, Netflix. You know, it's outrageous, really. We've had drag queens in classrooms and libraries, you know, gender confusion in 6-year-olds, sexualization through inclusive media. It's not inclusion. It's not about inclusion at all. It's about confusion. Let's get that straight as well. It's not about inclusion. It's about breaking identity. So basically, if you break a child's identity, the system will be able to rebuild it in how they want. You know, they are going to break the younger generations. So we, as, if you're my age anyway, watching this video, we have got responsibility to shield this ideology, which is very, very damaging. Very damaging. It's all psychological grooming on a generational scale.
The system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time to do it.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer. And of course it's a smaller motor because the Chinese economy is much smaller. So the world economy will have less of a motor. So it will move forward slower than it has in the last 25 years. But China will be the engine driving it forward, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished.
And then we've got cultural chaos, which again is all by design. You've got mass migration, the erasure of heritage, and Marxist infiltration, which is all part of the same destabilization model, as we've just been chatting about regarding the kids. It's infiltrating our own psyche. And to understand more regarding the plan for the migrant thing that's happening, this is why I say it was engineered when I mentioned that earlier on. Take a look at the Kalergi plan.
The Kalergi plan by Count Kalergi. Count Kalergi devised this plan whereby he wants to destroy the ethnicity of every European. He wants Europe to not have anymore their own single ethnicity. And that's why they're pushing all these immigrants to cross the Mediterranean and come into Europe. They are basically destroying Europe by doing that. We don't have anything racistic against anyone, of course, but what they're doing is completely criminal. And they're actually financing these people once they come to Italy. They have more rights than the Italians. They give them houses, they give them hotels, they even give them 30 euro a day so they can buy and pay for the mobile phones, for their things. I mean, they're treated better. There is no social security here in Italy, but still, these immigrants have everything. So Italians are, of course, getting more and more mad every day. And this is all because of the Kalergi plan to destroy the ethnicity of Europeans.
You know, do the research yourself, don't just take it from me. Look at the Kalergi plan, look at the Fabian Society, look at cultural Marxism, and then look at who's funding these influencers that are taking us down those paths. You've got George Soros, his Open Society, Bilderbergs that meet every year, the World Economic Forum and its young leaders. You know, none of these have voted in, are they? Not that we live in a true democracy, because that, unfortunately, is an illusion, as I've been explaining. And hopefully I've been explaining it well, you're not getting too confused. But these think tanks that are around, they are directing policy. And they want us fighting each other. You know, they want us fighting our neighbours and not seeing the chains that they've placed us under. They don't want us to see the fact that we are enslaved. If we feel we're free, well, you know, we've got to look at how we step out of this script, and to do that, we've got to start asking questions of, you know, who benefits from these stories that are placed on us, who is funding all of this, and what freedoms are we actually being asked to give up. And we need to reclaim ourselves, you know, our home, our land, our values, and our children. We need to build alliances beyond politics now. Forget politics. We're not voting our way out of this. You know, if you think about, if you just cast your mind back to each election, has anything really changed for the good? You might have felt they'll give you the odd bit of breadcrumb every once in a while, but let's be honest, this machine carries on, and it's not good for the people. So we need to build alliances beyond politics, really. We need to start building communities again. That's going to be really important, that we get people together again. Get to know your neighbours again, you know. Most people don't know the next door neighbour anymore. We really need to stop worshipping idols. It doesn't do us any favour at all. We need to become our own leaders. It's become quite clear, in a way, that actually we're very much herd animals. The way COVID worked, the herd, it's all hive mind stuff, but we're able to move a herd very easily. We need to become more critical thinking and to become our own leader, really. We need to recognise the theatre that's at play. And this theatre only works if we stay in our seats. So, instead of staying in our seats, we need to walk out. And we need to take the stage ourselves and change the script. I'm old enough to remember when the internet first came in, and it was very exciting. You know, it was very exciting. You know, you could get information you couldn't get before. You could talk to people from thousands and thousands of miles away in a messaging system or via email or whatever, and communicate in such a way. It was like amazing, and obviously it's sold to us as progress. You know, this digital world, you know, a connected, smart world. But it's a trap. And they actually told us as well. The World Wide Web, the WWW, we're buying into it. It's a web, and it's trapped us. So behind all the apps and the ads, you know, something else, there was a plan going on, and It's not a plan that was to serve the people, but it was to control us. And I mentioned earlier on, they play the long game. And we're at that point now. We're at that point now. Digital ID is here. Programmable money. They've got the capabilities of doing that, obviously, because crypto's been around for a while. So they've got it. It's all there, ready to roll out. They're already talking about 15-minute cities as well. And as I mentioned, social crediting and behavioural passports, well, it all links nicely in the digital future that they have planned. Well, it's actually not a future, it's digital now that they have planned. And they told us in 2020, I think it was Klaus Schwab, and he's a comical villain type character, so we probably all laugh at him, you know, because he's like a guy that was off a James Bond movie. But that's why we don't take it seriously, because we're programmed to think it's all funny and ridiculous. But he told us that we will own nothing and be happy. And that's what this is kind of all about. You know, the future is where we own nothing, we question nothing, and we feel nothing, because everything's programmed for us. And I think in 2020 they probably thought they had it. And then this is why it's important that we don't lose any faith or hope. I think they had it with the fear. But the people did rise up at that time, and we've got to rise up again. So the architecture of control is digital ID, which is effectively your identity on a blockchain, which is completely traceable, trackable, and likely to be hackable too. So your full ID is potentially at risk, with access to your money, your passport, your license, your driving license, everything, your credit, your mortgage, your benefits. It is hackable. As mentioned, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, that will be money that will expire. It's money that literally will control people, because it's just going to be like a voucher, and they'll be able to tell us how or what we can spend it on, or we'll lose it. They could switch it off. It could expire. We might not be allowed savings. We'll be given a certain amount. This will be the universal basic income that they are hoping to bring in is likely to be this kind of system, which will be then linked, obviously, to your one login account. And then there'll be the carbon situation. So you'll have carbon passports, you know, where you've got to behave in a certain way with your purchases, your diet, the amount of travel that you're doing. You know, if you make too many bad choices, well, you're locked out, aren't you? And that's why they're looking at these smart cities as well, so they can contain us in a zone of control. And if you think back in 2020, they already trialed these things. They already normalized things because they had the tiers, if you remember. They had the tiers in different areas where certain tier didn't have the infection, like tier in Bolton can go out till 9 o'clock, but tier in Wigan, well, they've been badly behaved, so they had to have a curfew, and they weren't allowed out. You know, so they've already tested this out with us and seen how people behave and fall in line. And everything in a smart city, with it being digital, with all the cameras, the facial recognition and everything else, everything will be monitored. Your phone, they'll know where you are. I hope it's sinking in a bit on what a nightmare this will be. Every step that we make will be logged. That tech exists. It's there. It's ready. It's already there. And as I mentioned, they only need a crisis for the people, the population, to justify having it. So keep your eye out for any more madness on that side of things. And if you think about 2020, they almost had it because they exhausted people, they scared people. People would literally they just wanted it to go back to normal. I remember having conversations with people that were like, look, I'm going to go and have the injection because I just want to go back to normal. Or those that were like, well, look, I just want to go on holiday. You know, so when you're battle worn and you put in fear, they know that most people are just going to accept the solution that they offer. Back in 2021, it was an experimental injection, and most people, it seems, went down that route. They were quite happy to have that in their bodies to try and go back to normal. And they used many slogans and fear tactics to pressure people into that. It was all coercion. It was all coercion. And they're going to be doing it again. They're going to throw all the fear at us again to accept this digital ID. But let me say, if we accept this digital ID infrastructure for what they want, you're never going to be free. You know what I mean? So you may as well stand up now, because you're never going to be free. And for the sake of our children, if we don't stop this, our kids, they won't just live in a surveillance state. As I mentioned before, they'll grow up thinking it's normal. You know, that privacy is selfish and obedience is a noble cause. It's not about policies anymore. It's more than that. It's about preserving what makes us human, because they're taking away what it is to be human. And we have a choice. We have a choice right in front of us right now. We either let fear dictate the terms of our existence, or we reclaim the right to live freely outside this grid that they've designed for us. And the time is now. There is no other time. There's no other time. It's literally now. So literally there's a war going on, and it's not with tanks and it's not with guns. Okay, it's in our classrooms, it's on our streaming platforms, it's in cartoons and in curriculum, and it's not about liberating minds, it's about confusing them. And the targets are not soldiers, they're our kids.
Schools train people to be ignorant with style. They give you the equipment that you need to be a functional ignoramus. American schools do not equip you to deal with things like logic. They don't give you the criteria by which to judge between good and bad in any medium or format. And they prepare you to be a usable victim for a military-industrial complex that needs manpower. As long as you're just smart enough to do a job and just dumb enough to swallow what they feed you, you're going to be all right. But if you go beyond that, you're going to have these grave doubts that give you stomach problems, headaches, make you want to go out and do something else. So I believe that schools mechanically and very specifically try and breed out any hint of creative thought in the kids that are coming up.
So what's the alternative for the parent who would agree with you?
Well, remember that the school isn't the only place that a child gets educated. If you realize that the schools are doing damage, and I believe this, I believe that schools do a lot of damage to kids, then you should do what you can at home to help give them something to counteract what's happening to them at school.
You mean encourage creativity?
Encourage them to read things other than what the school gives them. Let them feel that you as a parent want them to be smart, not just to be successful, not just to be a nice little person, that you want them to develop their thinking apparatus.
So the culture war that's going on at the moment isn't by accident. You know, it's not happening by chance. Like I mentioned before, look into the Kalergi plan. It's literally in action, you know, and this is done to dilute culture. It's done to destabilize societies from within. This is engineered. You know, this is why mass migration is encouraged without any kind of cohesion. It's why tradition is mocked often, and why mothers are told that motherhood is like oppressive and boys are told masculinity is toxic. This is all by design, because strong families create strong communities, and strong communities don't need digital ID or CBDCs or corporate governance to survive. They don't need any of that. The media is obviously the mouthpiece, and you've got Netflix, Disney, Hollywood and the BBC. That's not just about entertainment. These are literally indoctrination machines.
Okay, took a while, but we finally found a file for a Bailey Del Vecchio. Is 32 Burnt Hill Road still the current address?
Yeah.
Have you been giving him fluids? If he's dehydrated, we'll need to place an IV. Have him change into this.
I don't want the blue one.
Well...
I hear someone's not feeling well. Let's take a look at the little man.
Can I please talk to you two outside? I know that you guys are busy, but as you would see, if you looked at her and not her chart, Bailey is not a boy. And by treating her like one, you are completely ignoring who she is. You're making her feel insignificant and humiliated. And that's not going to help her feel good or safe or calm. So, from here on out, please recognize her for who she is. And if at all possible, could you find me a non-blue hospital gown?
I apologize.
You know, look at the shows, look at the language, look who's being platformed and who's being silenced. Even children's content is loaded with political messaging now as well. Because if you can program a child early enough, you don't need to program them later on, do you? You get someone under 7 years of age, they're easy programmed. We've all been indoctrinated and we have to accept that. But it's getting worse. And we, as parents, need to reclaim the sacred role of parenting. We need to recognise what's going on and we need to step in. This is not the moment to outsource our parenting to schools or state institutions. We are the parents. You know, so we need to look at how we could potentially change this. You know, if it means taking your children out of systems, maybe. You know, there's people doing a lot more of that at homeschooling at the moment. You know, I'm not saying that is the full answer, by the way. Everyone's situation is different, and not only that, you know, children do need to socialise as well. But we need to see what's going on in these curriculums, and we need to challenge. We need to challenge this. You know, because why are kids being taught sexual items under 6-year-old? It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We need to be the ones teaching our kids. We need to be teaching them how to think critically, you know, and question things. And we need to restore play. Kids should be playing. They should be playing and being creative. We need to protect their innocence, because their innocence is being removed. And innocence is the soul's natural state as well, because once it's taken, it's hard to get that back. Anyone who you've seen who's been in trauma as a kid, they lose that innocence. And we don't want that. It's literally, this is the line in the sand. This is the hill. Not just because it's about children, but because it's about the future of humanity itself. We have to do this. If we let this go on, the next generation won't even remember what it means to be human. They won't have an idea. We're the ones who have to stand now. We have to be united, clear and unafraid, and then we can start to turn the tide. And what about the hidden hands? Let's have a look at the hidden hands behind this agenda. How does this all start and why does it all happen, you know? What we're seeing now, the cost of living nightmare and cultural breakdown and digital control, it's not just happened, this is all engineered. And it's not by one man or even by one country. This is a network of interests who profit from collapse, and then they sell us the cure. So let's name a few key players and do your own research, as I keep saying, have a look into it. One of the key players is the World Economic Forum. They're not elected by anyone, but they seem to be writing policy for nations and implementing, it seems, young global leaders into prime minister or president positions. Then you've got George Soros's Open Society Foundation. You know, that's a massive empire of influence that has been pushing radical change through the banner of democracy. And that's why we're seeing the rise of wokeism and all the leftist madness at the moment. Then you've got the Bilderberg Group, which are, you know, politicians, royals, bankers and CEOs that meet behind closed doors every year with no minutes and no accountability. But, you know, what are they discussing? What are they discussing? They've been meeting for a very long time, by the way. And then we've got the UN, the wonderful United Nations, and the Agenda 2030.
This is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. It is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world. And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992. It's a United Nations plan. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. And so many of us around the world think that well, sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no, it really is not. It's about moving populations into city centers, concentrated city centers, and clearing them out of the rural areas. All systems have to be brought into harmony in order to control them all. Because when systems don't meet, when they're out of balance or not in sync with one another, they can't be controlled centrally. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government and total control from a central unit. Every nation that signed on to Agenda 21 has its local Agenda 21 plan. People in the United States are completely unaware of this. If I go out and talk about this, the United States press attacks me and calls me, which is totally ridiculous. It is a, but it's not a theory. It's a fact. The three pillars of United Nations Agenda 21 are economy, ecology, and equity, the three E's. And everyone sort of thinks that they know what that means, the idea of social equity. It must mean that, well, everyone's going to have access to clean water and clean air, and no one's property is going to be used as a dumping ground because they are at a poverty level. But really what social equity is about impoverishing huge portions of the population and bringing down the developed nations. Everything that we're looking at now is destined to collapse our economies. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. And what major corporations want in this development is to be able to have full movement of workers without borders or boundaries, to be able to move their goods through without regulations, and to reduce wages. And so this is the goal. So this is what you find with social equity. And of course, economy and ecology is about, these are the three circles: economy, ecology, and social equity. And where they meet in the center is balance. But really that balance is a communitarian balance. So it's not balance of well-being of the people. What it is it's a balance for corporations so that they can exploit and control and have populations in an area, in tightly packed, dense areas, so that they can be surveilled and managed. And this is what that balance looks like as far as the development of a totalitarian state is. The mainstream media is owned by 5 major corporations, and you're not going to get this information from the mainstream press. So you need to be your own press. You need to educate yourself. You need to get out there and educate your neighbors, your community, your real community. You need to help your children understand that they're being indoctrinated from pre-kindergarten to postgraduate school. All of us have a responsibility to ourselves and to others. This is true community, to work for personal freedom. And always remember that even though we work as a group, if we do work as a group, we're all individuals in those groups, and we answer only to ourselves. And this is essential. It's essential as free human beings. This is what we are. We are free, and we need to continue to be free. And I do believe that we will win, but we have to become aware that there is a fight, and then make our friends and our neighbors and our community aware as well, and work together.
All on the surface is all wonderful and nice colours as well, if you look at the website. Peace and sustainability. God, I hate that word now. Beneath all that is literally a blueprint for total data-driven governance and behavioural control. Literally. And then we've got the influencers, as I've mentioned, doing all the PR for those agendas. You know, you've got your Greta Thunberg, for example, and she weaponises guilt for carbon compliance. What was she saying? That we're stealing her childhood.
How dare you! You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
So they bring all this in, and we're emotional, so we fall for this kind of material a lot of the time. And let's be honest, we don't want our planet harmed either, and I'm not trying to dilute the fact that there's something isn't wrong with the way that we're managing our planet, but I don't think it's generally the people on the street's fault here either. So we have these characters, like I say, Greta Thunberg, your Tommy Robinsons, who, that's not even his real name anyway, is it? Stephen Lennon Yaxley. These people are division. People like Yaxley are division dressed as patriotism, potentially Mossad linked as well. Don't know for sure, but I've read enough to suggest he maybe is. He's certainly pro that side of things. How patriotic he is, I'm not exactly sure. But maybe I'm just a bit distrusting, you know, again, the Q movement, I'm a bit distrusting on that as well, you know, where they tell us to trust the plan, while the plan seems to be unfolding without any resistance. I think it's down to us to be the resistance, because if we just sit back and trust the plan, I think we're going to get steamrolled. And obviously, they have us all fighting between left and right, Tory, Labour, and yeah, it just distracts us from the fact that we have the power ourselves together as a united front. So, how is this even a trap, you know, this controlled opposition? Well, controlled opposition works because if you don't need to just control sort of government policy, you've got to control resistance, haven't you? So again, it's a problem, reaction, solution kind of situation, really. You know, a problem could come in place, an economic collapse or social unrest, for example, and then they provoke the reaction, which is creating fear, protest and division, anger, and then they'll deliver a solution, which they already have ready every time, and they offer the hero, which is the controlled opposition, to funnel the energy into something they own. That's why I mentioned Tommy Robinson, and don't shoot me if you're a Tommy Robinson fan. Again, I'm happy to be wrong. Donald Trump, hero. Again, happy to be wrong. I just feel that these people, the Russell Brands and people like that, are the Pied Pipers that will potentially take us directly into digital ID. And that's why the world keeps moving in the same direction, no matter who's in power, because we're literally just pawns, aren't we? We've just been shifted about. You know, the real power isn't political, it's structural, it's financial and hidden. So our country isn't really a country anymore, it's a franchise, unfortunately. That's what it seems to be. Global corporations now actually have more power than governments. They seem to be running the show. You've got BlackRock and Vanguard, who own most of the media, food, pharma and tech, and then you've got all the digital stuff, Silicon Valley, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, building the infrastructure for our smart cities and surveillance, Oracle, you know, they're the ones involved there. With Palantir and Google, etc., holding all our health and ID data. And through environmental social governance scores, the social crediting scores, they're already assigning values to what used to be rights. So we're not a citizen with that system, we're a unit of compliance. So the strategy is demolition and then rebuild it it's the Fabian method, really. You know, break the old world slowly so the people ask for a new one, the new world order, which they've been rattling on about for a long time. So make this place as unbearable as possible and let's have something new. And that's what they seem to be doing. Well, they did say it was going to be a reset, didn't they? This is the great reset, you know, so here we go again. So they'll collapse economies through engineered inflation and debt. Look at the cost of living now, you know, it's just getting outrageous. It's all by design, all of it by design. And then through mass migration, as I've described, you know, they'll collapse identity and culture, and then they'll collapse our family unit through programming and propaganda and stress. And then they'll offer us a fix, won't they? Digital wallets, universal basic income, climate lockdowns, carbon scores, AI therapists and doctors, UN approved education for all. Wonderful. The problem being is this world, this world, this utopia world that they have planned for us, costs us absolutely everything. Everything. The hidden religion of control is no longer politics, by the way. You know, it's literally a belief system, and these people follow a different God, one that feeds on control, submission, and despair. So how do they control the narrative? You know, in every era of tyranny, language seems to be the leash. It's not the laws, nor the armies even, and it's not even the tech that's out there. We're under a spell, a story, and that's the story is what keeps us in line, really. You know, cast your mind back again to 2020. The story is what kept us in fear. They didn't need to have police, even though it was used occasionally. They didn't need the army on the streets or anything like that. The story is what kept us in our houses, some of us, not me, but some of us. And right now, I think we're living in probably the greatest enchantment of all stories, really. Most people believe what they believe, not because they chose it, but because they've absorbed it. You know, from the moment that we're born, we are taught how to speak, what to fear, who to trust, and what's real. The media itself defines the villain. The politicians stage some kind of ridiculous fight, and the experts set the terms for us. And then we've got these platforms now on the internet that shape discussion with algorithms. So it's not really just about information. It's literally narrative engineering as well, and this is where discernment comes into play. We've got to look into things and discern what we see as real. It's getting more challenging, especially with AI, because AI videos now are so real, you don't even know what's real anymore. You know, so that's another problem we're facing as we're moving further into this tech world. And I repeat about the fact that they use our emotion to provide us the problem reaction solution. You know, think how many events have happened where we're then accepting of new laws, if you like. Well, they're not normally laws, but you know, new ways of living, and it's usually takes away some of our freedoms. And people like me are deemed conspiracy theorists, you know, where that again, these terms are used to kind of put you off. So the fact that you may be questioning things, you may be back in mind and say, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I want to be called a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to be called an anti-vaxxer, or you know, and that will be used. But we've got to man up a little bit now. You know what I mean? It's a case of who gives a shit. In fact, wear it like a badge of honour. I certainly do. So one of the new traps, obviously, for the digital ID is the green agenda, and a lot of people, us conspiracy theorists, have been rooting about this for a little bit. You know, it's again used to bring in emotion and bring in fear that we're destroying our planet, and it's the climate change agenda, you know, and they bring it under the green banner, and they're rewriting laws and rewriting behaviours and morality through this narrative, this story. As I mentioned, you know, it's about bringing people into a story, and that's how they control us. Then they'll control us through guilt, you know, and the compliance through fear, and obviously with the digital ID, you'll have your carbon kind of tax on there, and credits, carbon credits, you know, where you've got to look after the planet, but it'll be used to control population, really. You know, they've actually putting it out there that CO2 is evil and blah blah blah, and you know, burning wood is bad, and all this kind of nonsense. It's literally all control. The salvation for saving the world, as they will be, one to tax us even more, but to use digital ID to track people's behaviour, you know, on how they're looking after the planet with their carbon footprint. You know, how much travelling are you doing and things like that. It's literally going to be that. And if you question it, you're going to likely to be a heretic, or at worst a conspiracy theorist. They're actually weaponizing nature, which is quite unbelievable. You know, nature isn't being honoured anymore, and it's being used to justify all this control situation. Like I mentioned, carbon credits, 15-minute cities, climate potential lockdowns, you know, energy rationing, which could happen, you know, meat restrictions. They're talking about, you know, they're trying to push us into having lab-grown food or eating bugs and all that kind of crap. You know, this is just nonsense. We need to start reclaiming ourselves and see it as it is, because all these digital IDs are going to be linked to these carbon scores, as I mentioned, and this is going to be compliance tracking, and this is how they're going to control it. Again, problem, reaction, solution. You've got to remember, the green puppets that are doing all this stuff, they're flying around. You know, they're all billionaires flying around jet to jet all over the world. Did they really give a monkeys about this manufactured nonsense? It's nonsense. And I'm not saying that, like I say, I'm not diluting the fact that there isn't some kind of issue, but it isn't anything near what they're saying it is. You know, back in the 80s, I remember growing up where they were talking about the ozone layer and acid rain and things like that. They were telling us that we were going to be underwater by the year 2000. None of that's happened. You know, all this propaganda has always been used, as long as I can remember, to put us under fear. But now they've got the digital infrastructure in place, that itself, with the control of your money and the ability to shame and divide with social crediting. And in China they have it on billboards, people on billboards and things like that. The social crediting's gone to pot. Seriously, this dystopian nightmare is literally on the doorstep, and we need to see what it is for what it is. This is not about saving the planet, it's about control. Agenda 2030 with the Sustainable Development Goals, it sounds beautifully noble, with zero hunger, gender equality, clean energy, responsible consumption, all that, but these goals are going to be used to justify centralisation. It's about control. You need to see it for what it is. It's literally the total management of human behaviour. Your freedom's gone. It's not sustainability at all. That has become an ugly word, more so than a conspiracy theorist. Before climate was politicised, you know, nature was sacred, really. You know, the land was sacred. We were closer to that. And seasons were not crises. You know, we're all just going to die because it's summer. You know, there were cycles. Seasons were cycles, and we had. This is the thing. The generations that have come won't remember the seasons we used to have as well. It's all changed, and we can go into geoengineering at some point as well. But this stuff is real. This world has changed, not for the better, but it's to control the population. You know, the spray in the skies, they'll tell us that's for the good of our self. You know, that we block out the sun because we've got too much sun, too much heat. It's just rubbish. We need to start looking how we return to local food, local communities, working with our markets again, you know, coming away from the big supermarkets, and we need to decentralize our living. We need to connect more with our neighbors and come together, because with the strength in that number. We need to hold the line. This isn't a fight against environmental care, it's a fight against environmental coercion. The earth doesn't need more panic. It needs awakened humans rooted in love, community, truth and natural cycles, not carbon tracked units in a digital gulag that they've planned for us. Okay, so with all that said and all that fear that I've just thrown around and the fact that this is all going on, we really need to think about how we withdraw consent to this, and how we navigate. And I always said navigating the juggernaut that's heading our way. And I said this back in 2020. We're going to navigate this. This is already here. It's already here. So we need to navigate it. Digital ID isn't going to work if millions refuse to enroll onto it. You know, it will, you know, programmable money will fail if people are going to trade outside of it. You know, so this is where strength in numbers and building networks is going to be important, because it's the people that will make this happen, not the policy that's forced upon us. You know, we have to be the ones that come together and be the change and make the change. So all this stuff will collapse if we make a decision on how we want to live our lives. We don't need to overthrow any system. We just need to stop feeding it, basically. Remember, mandate is not law. It's not law. A policy is not consent. An app is not authority. It'll only work if we believe that it is. The entire house of cards is actually built on compliance through our confusion, our obedience through fear, agreement through silence. But once we start to see it, and you never unsee it, we can start to look at how to refuse this. And we've got to refuse it without rage as well. We've got to, we don't need to get angry. We've got to be grounded and calm. Even though I probably don't sound too calm right now, it's important that we come together and stand, as I keep mentioning, collectively. You know, there's farmers that will trade in a certain way. It's mothers that will not accept this for their children. And we've got to then look at, as a network, of how we barter and trade with each other out of this system that they have planned. You know, that's not going to be linked to any of these ridiculous social crediting scores that they most certainly have planned. We don't need the anger or any kind of stupid kind of civil unrest, because that's what they want, because again that will bring fear into a population, and that's the last thing anybody needs, because that will be just a case of, well, we need digital ID then, you know. So we don't need any of that. We can find our way by simply saying no. You know, refusal is a powerful thing, but it won't work on its own either. We must also look at ways of building what they cannot. So that would be bartering economies, communities, building communities, trusted communities, creating a sacred education for our children to change things for the future of humanity. Not so we're going backwards. We need to change it in more positive, to remember, you know, what it is to be human. You know, we need to find healers that are outside the system. We need builders that are outside of the codes. You know, this is how we win this, not by attacking what's collapsing, but by stepping aside and laying new foundations for it all. We've got to remember we're not alone, because they want us to feel isolated. That's why we've got to, you know, get into your local communities and bring people together. You know what I mean? You're not the last sane voice in a world of madness. We're all talking like this. There's millions and millions of people that will not want this situation. Once they understand what it is, who wants to live in that kind of, you know, that kind of tyranny, that kind of dystopian future? And it's like I say, it's not a future. It's literally here, and we need to be the ones that make the change. And we're all finding each other now as well. So if you've come across this video, or you need to reach out, feel free to reach out. You know, we're all networking. We're all trying to help each other and support each other to like I say, avoid, to step away from the juggernaut that's literally coming straight for us. Remember, this is not about left or right anymore. It's not about reform or revolution. It's literally a yes to life and a no to the machine that we keep voting in. You know, it starts with one voice, and that is yours. Remember that you're not alone, and we can pull ourselves through this. Now, obviously, these systems have been rolled out in different countries already. China, as I mentioned, they've had it for quite a while, and it's pretty bad. India's had a big rollout of it as well. Don't think that because they've got it, that they've not got people that are working their way around it as well. Do you know what I mean? So let's be confident on the fact that there's going to be ways around things. Let's not be frightened about this situation. We need to work together to find the alternative. You know, resistance is happening globally as well. This is thrown at people globally, and resistance will be happening globally as well. The question isn't can we fight this, it's whether we're ready to join the fight that's actually already underway then. You know, because there is rebellion happening everywhere. I was looking into things, you know, despite these polished speeches and polished boots, this technocratic machine is not being embraced in, you know, we're seeing the propaganda, but it's not being embraced in these countries. It's being rejected outright. It's being rejected. In China, they had, I mean, they've got the most mature digital control grid, like I say. They've got facial recognition linked to their ID, which we will have. Social crediting systems are already in place with the punishments, the travel bans, job access, school admission. But they use an app called WeChat for payments, surveillance and comms. So it's a bit like the Gov One login that's planned here. You know, it's all on one app. But in that belly of the beast, people are still fighting back. They've got active rebellion going on. There was protests in 2022 where citizens were holding up blank sheets of paper to protest the censorship. Minimalist resistance. It was impossible to arrest someone for a blank sign, yet the message was clear that we're being silenced. You know, they're using technology as well. So they've got VPN sort of virtual private networks that are bypassing the Great Firewall that's in place in China. So you've got tech-savvy dissidents that you know, have access to the uncensored internet, and foreign media and whistleblower forums and things like that. You know, so they have a digital solution to avoid this as well. You know, so this is what's going to be happening all over the world, and much cleverer people than me that will be doing this. And this is why networking is going to be crucial, and also discernment, because those networks, not to scare you, but will also get infiltrated. So you've got to have discernment when you're in your groups as well. It's not an easy game that we're in. It's not an easy game that we're in. But stay true to your heart, and we're going to be fine. You know, it's about being clever. You know, I believe in China they're using sort of hidden messages in art and memes and slang. You know, so the shift in language constantly to dodge censorship algorithms. So we've got to get smart on stuff, you know, because we know how this works in terms of algorithm. We know as well that we're sometimes in an echo chamber. How far this video goes, I have no idea. It might just reach the people that already know what's going on. But you know, this is where we've got to try and get smart, get these videos out to people, and get this information out to people. You know, in China again, like I say, they've got technology. They're using peer-to-peer commerce, you know, offline payments, USB stored cryptocurrencies. They'll be using cash. You know, they'll be finding the way of bartering and looking after each other. You know, they'll be using old dumb phones and burner devices and various other ways. Sort of camouflage as well, and clothing as well that deals with the facial recognition. So there's obviously loads of ways that people are going to be dealing with these things. In India, recently, our big hero Keir Starmer was in India, you know, looking at their, obviously, infrastructure that they've just put out. They've got the world's largest biometric ID database, apparently, that's linking every citizen's retina scan, fingerprints, tax records, bank accounts, phone numbers. It's totally totalitarian. But rural India isn't playing ball with that. There's a resistance going on in rural India. Thousands have refused to link this ID to bank accounts and are now using local trade circles instead. You know, the farmers were protesting there in 2021 and millions marched and camped for months. And an economic rebellion. This slowed the digital handover in rural regions. So protesting still has its part to play. Offline economies in slums and villages remaining strong, you know, untraceable, cash-based and unlinked to these national databases. India's chaos is its advantage. Total control is harder when half the country is still off-grid. So there are plenty of ways, you know. Nigeria and Africa, the CBDCs have been rejected over there as well. Look into it. There's many people that are looking to resist. We're not on our own. It's on our doorstep now, and I know there's fear in this. But we, as a community, can grow strong, and we can avoid all of this. There's also, look at nonmaskcompliance.com. There's loads of opportunity there on how to get involved and Fiona has placed many items of how we can start resisting the nonsense that's currently on our doorstep. Please don't be frightened. Please come together. You know, I've got a Stellify social that's happening once a month on Zoom. That's obviously in a digital infrastructure, but physically get into your areas again, as people did in Stand in the Park. Start building those networks. It's going to be very crucial. Support one another. Support one of each other. Put all the differences to one side right now. This is bigger than any differences that we have with each other in a personal frame. We've got our children to protect. We've got our innocence to protect. We've got the future of humanity to protect. And this is the time. There is no other time.